So dedicated to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Please join me with this Mangalacharan prayer. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes, which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance, with the torchlight of knowledge. Ms. Suvarna, I think you're not muted. Okay. Continuing. Please join me for the Prabhupada Pranam Mantra as well. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimha iti Namine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Langayatim Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Om Tatsat. Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai Sri Sri Nitai Sundar Gaura Hari Ki. So please join me with the Panchatattva Pranam and also the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which we will recite 3 times. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we will do some glorification of the Bhagavad Gita before we begin. So the verse is Gita Dita Chayena Pi Bhakti Bhavena Chetasa Veda Shastra Pura. Oh, I think I did this yesterday. I forgot to change it. Veda Shastra Puranani Tena Ditani Sarvasaha. Sri Vaishnava Tantra Sara, verse 23. The study of the Vedas and Puranas, verily the study of all scriptures, is completed in all respects by one who studies the Gita with devotion. I'm sorry, I did this yesterday. I forgot to put a different verse. Never mind, tomorrow I will do it. Let's recite the this prayer 3 times. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Right, so we are continuing with Bhagavad Gita. Yesterday we did chapter 13, and it was entitled this is not the title. It was a different title. Chapter 13 was, what was it? Kshetra Jnana Vibhaga Yoga, right? Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. That was the title. So that we covered yesterday, and the key takeaways were, Prakriti. We understood what was material nature, right? Remember these models which I showed you yesterday. So the Lord has 2 energies, Prakriti, material energy, as well as spiritual energy. So we, the souls, are part of that spiritual energy, and we are called the enjoyer, Purusha. But the Lord is also the enjoyer. And when the souls want to enjoy separately from the Lord, when they want to misuse their independence and they want to enjoy matter separately, they want to lord it over matter, then they have to take a body. They have to take a body because it's part of the material world. And one who knows this is called a Kshetranyan. And this is basically what is knowledge all about. And knowledge has an objective, which is Niyam, the goal of knowledge, which is the Supreme Lord. So we covered this yesterday. So, but don't worry if you haven't got it well, because we will go through it a little bit again today. And we also talked about the soul and the body. So there is gross body and there's a subtle body. So these were some of the things that we discussed yesterday. So we talked about knowledge and the goal of knowledge. And we also heard that this knowledge is not essential, right? What is essential is that we have to hear with faith. So hearing with faith can deliver us, because then automatically the purport of this knowledge, we will automatically know the niyam, the one who should be the object of knowledge, right? So the purpose of knowledge is to give us understanding of the object of knowledge. But through the path of devotion, we will understand the object of knowledge directly. And as we understand the object of knowledge directly, we will also get jnanam. So that was what was discussed yesterday. So we will go through some of these same topics again, but we are going further to the next point. So today is chapter 14. The title is The Three Modes of Material Nature. So the Sanskrit translation is, the Sanskrit word is Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Now yesterday we mentioned vibhaga. Vibhaga means difference. So knowing the difference between gunas. So in this material world has some quality. When we talk about material nature, we say what nature? Nature means there must be some qualities, isn't it? So therefore we will discuss that today. So it begins with basically Lord Krishna telling Arjuna that this material world, this material creation, and knowledge of this material creation is very, very wonderful. It helps you to develop more faith, because previously we talked about faith. How do we develop faith to the Supreme Lord, right? So one of course, devotional service is increasing our faith. But while we are doing devotional service, we will start to understand more and more about the glories of the Lord, because we are hearing, right? Shravanam process. So as we hear about, the energies of the Lord, the wonderful nature of his creation, how he creates all this universe. So once we understand this very nicely, then our faith also will grow. Just like we had a story yesterday, I mentioned the story of the cobbler and the Brahmana. So the cobbler is a simple cobbler. He doesn't know the details of all these technical aspects, but he had faith. And he also knew the greatness of the Lord, that the Lord can actually do so many things. If he can pack an entire banyan tree into a small seed, so what's the difficulty in getting an elephant to pass through the needle, right? So that was the story yesterday. So that was Krishna, therefore, summarizes that and begins chapter 14 by saying, the goal of all this knowledge is so that one can reach the Param Gati. Param Gati means the ultimate source or the ultimate achievement. So one can get to the ultimate goal. That is the purpose of knowledge. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. Like how the Brahmana, he could not understand the goal of knowledge. He had knowledge, but he could not understand the goal of it because he did not have faith. So both has to come hand in hand. So then this is verse 1 and 2. So we will read out verse 2 together. Idam jnanam upashritya mama sadharmyam agataha sarge api nopajayante pralayena vyatanti cha. Translation: by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. So this is what this knowledge can give us. So together with devotional service, when we apply this knowledge, because when we do devotional service with knowledge and with consciousness, then we become fixed, right? One can become fixed in this process, and he can eventually attain the transcendental nature. So that's the param gati, to attain the transcendental nature like my own. So that means we attain the spiritual world. We get a spiritual, we realize our Atma. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So this is the goal. So once we attain this state, then we do not take birth again in this material world. So that's the idea. So then from verse 3 to 5, Krishna gives more details about this knowledge, about this jnana, about this nature of this material world. Because when we understand this nature of this material world, then it strengthens our faith more. So therefore, Krishna continues with 14.3. So in the earlier chapter, we heard about Prakriti, we heard about, the place, the body, the material nature. But now from chapters 13 all the way to chapter 18, Krishna will go deeper and deeper into these different energies. So different levels he will explain to us about understanding the material nature, how this universe works, how this material creation works. Because when we know how it works and when we know the laws of this material world, then we will know what to do and what not to do, so that we can focus our intelligence in the param gatim, or the ultimate goal. Okay, so 14.3, the verse reads like this. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dudami aham Shambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. Translation: the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. So this one needs a bit of understanding. So I just bear with me with these two verses, and I will explain this concept with a model after this. So one more verse. So before that, just to reiterate, this total material substance. So if you were to take all the material substance like earth, water, fire, air, everything that we see around us, all of material creation, if we were to distill it all into one single ball, right? So then that would be part of what is called also Brahman. Okay, so I will explain this point in a while. And let's move to the next verse. So the next verse, it gives, as I mentioned, gives knowledge, right? Sarva yonishu kaunteya murtayaha sambhavantiyaha tasham brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradaha pita. So this is also a very important verse. It tells us that we come from the Supreme Lord. So here is the translation. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. So we can understand that we are all living entities, all jivas, we are all children of God. So he is the original father. And therefore, just like how the father and the son, they will have similar qualities. So we also have similar qualities. The difference is the Lord is Vibhu. He is extremely large and he's unlimited. We are eternal. The Lord is also eternal. The Lord is unlimited, but we are not unlimited. We are limited. So we are one particle jiva. So like that, there are many particle. There are unlimited jivas, many jivas in that sense. But then each one jiva is by itself limited. So the same quality is just like a gold mine and a particle of gold. So we are the particle of gold, and God is that gold mine. So both the quality is the same, right? The number of atoms and all that, the behavior, everything is the same. It's just that quantity is different, right? It's inconceivable. But we are part of that Supreme Lord directly. So, right, here there are actually some concepts which we need to understand. So earlier, Krishna said that this material world, if you see this verse here, it is to be understood that all species, that means all that we see, there are basically about 400,000, I can't remember the number, that many species of creatures, groups of creatures in this material creation. So all of these are made possible because they take birth in this material nature. And Krishna is the seed-giving father. So earlier, Krishna mentioned that the material nature, if you look at this verse, right, he says that Brahman is the source of birth. So we can also understand that material nature is also part of Brahman. So how to understand this nicely? So I'm going to show you a model so we can understand. Now, yesterday, I introduced to you this concept where, you remember the Supreme Lord Ishvara, right? He has two energies. So that same thing I'm going to mention again. So Bhagavan or Parameshwara, he is the source of all energies. He possesses all energies. He is called Shaktiman, the one who owns all energies. Okay. So he has multiple energies, many types of energies. But we can classify them into two categories. So one category is what we call Antaranga Shakti or spiritual energy. And actually, it is only one type of energy. It is spiritual energy. Everything is spiritual, right? But what happens, we will explain the difference. So this is called Antaranga, or means internal energy, and there is external energy. Now, this external energy is nothing but a shadow of this internal energy. Remember, I also mentioned this concept in earlier chapters, I think in chapter 7, if I'm not mistaken, right? So the Lord has many types of energies. We can classify all of that into what we call Antaranga Shakti. And this Shakti casts a shadow. The shadow of this energy is what we call the other energy, or the Bahiranga Shakti, which is the material energy. So the spiritual energy, actually there's one energy, spiritual, but this energy casts a shadow, and that shadow is the material energy. What's the difference? The difference is material energy is inert. There is no life in it. It is simply matter, right? Whereas the spiritual energy has life. So that's the difference predominantly. It has consciousness. Material energy doesn't have consciousness. Now, both these energies are part of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, all of these is part of Brahman. Now remember, Brahman, yesterday I mentioned that the Lord is Brahman. We are also part of that Brahman, right? So Brahman means it includes all of the Supreme Lord's energy. So that means it includes the Supreme Lord. It includes also us, all the jivas, which is part of that spiritual energy. And because the material energy is also a shadow or a part of the Supreme Lord's energy, the material energy is also part of Brahman. So that's why we can understand this verse. If you look at this verse 13, it says, the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth. So here he's not talking about us, Jiva Brahman, or he's not talking about the Supreme Lord Brahman. He's talking about the energy, the material energy. And how do we know this? Because in the next verse, he says that it should be understood that all species of life are made possible by birth in this material nature. So he's talking about the material nature. So material nature is that Brahman which Krishna is referring to. Okay, so I hope that is clear. so we can understand this point. But we are not done yet. So let's move on with this model. Now let's take that material energy. Remember this energy? So this is the material energy, the shadow, right? This material energy, it's generally okay. If we take this material energy and look at this material energy now, so let's forget the rest. Let's only look at this material energy. Okay, so generally it is called prakriti, this material energy, generally, right? Actually, prakriti means energy. It can also refer to the other energy, the spiritual energy, but it depends on the context of where the verse is used. Generally, it's called prakriti. But at the same time, you know, there are three aspects of this material energy. Okay, so the first aspect is pradhan. Pradhan means, because it's a shadow. Now the shadow is only cast in the beginning, right? So that it doesn't exist on its own. It is basically a shadow of the spiritual energy. So in the beginning, it is not manifested. This material nature, this pradhan, is not manifested. It's not there yet. It's just the potential is there. And then later, it appears when the Lord wants to create this material world, right? Then that pradhan converts into, it starts to exist. So it manifests. So when pradhan, it didn't manifest, then in prakriti, it manifests. And then when the Lord glances at this, when the Lord energizes the prakriti, he decides to use the prakriti. He starts to think about using the prakriti. Then this prakriti changes into what is called Mahat Tattva. Now, how to understand this? So I'll give you a simple example. So imagine an acorn. An acorn is like the seed of the tree, right? The entire tree can grow from this acorn. So imagine Pradhan to be like the acorn. So in the beginning, there is no tree, but the acorn is there, right? So what happens when the Lord glances at this acorn, right? When he decides to look at the acorn, so how he builds this creation? He doesn't build, he just has to glance, he just has to think. So when the Lord looks at Pradhan, right? Then what happens? That Pradhan, what happens when the acorn is given sunlight and rain? So the glance of the Lord at Pradhan is just like how sun and rain is given to the acorn. So when that happens, what happens? This is the glance of the Lord. So the Supreme Lord, in the form of Mahavishnu, he glances at the Pradhan, and that glance activates the Pradhan, and Prakriti becomes activated, it becomes manifested. Pradhan wasn't manifested. When material nature is unmanifested, it's called Pradhan. When the Lord decides to look at it, when the Lord glances at it, it becomes Prakriti, it becomes manifested. And what happens after it gets manifested? Then we have growth. The acorn starts to shoot a growth out, isn't it? So, and then it becomes a tree. So once it starts the growth, that's called Mahat Tattva. So similarly, material nature in the beginning is unmanifested. That means it's not there yet. And then it suddenly manifests as Prakriti because the Lord wants to use this energy, and he glances at this Pradhan. Then the Prakriti is manifested, and as the Lord continues to glance, the Prakriti becomes activated and it becomes Mahatattva. So initially in Pradhan, everything is one single lump, like a cosmic soup. You know, the entire universe is all like, you know, the scientists will say the Big Bang Theory. In the beginning, everything is one small, tiny dot of infinite density. That's what the scientists say. And then suddenly there was a bang, explosion. And then everything is expanding, expanding, expanding. So that's what caused that explosion. So that one the scientists cannot tell, right? So in the beginning, there's the infinite density particle, and that is Pradhan. And when the Lord glances at it, that Pradhan becomes Prakriti, and then it explodes. Boom. So then it becomes the entire universal creation, or the what we call Mahatattva. So the difference is Pradhan is not manifested, Prakriti is manifested. Mahatattva also manifested. But what's the difference between Prakriti and Mahatattva then? Okay, so Pradhan, there are two qualities, right? It is unmanifested, it is also undifferentiated. That means everything is lumped into one. Whereas Prakriti is manifested, but still undifferentiated. It's now activated, energetic. Imagine it's like the dot of particle is now plugged to the electric socket. Initially, it's not plugged, there's no energy. So it's unmanifested and it's also undifferentiated. Prakriti becomes manifested because it's receiving energy from the Lord. The Lord is glancing at Pradhan, so it becomes manifested, but it still hasn't divided itself yet. So when it divides itself, when the Lord continues to glance, it divides itself into Mahatattva. So that Mahatattva is called manifested and differentiated. It is now different. How it became different? It became 27 elements. So this is described in the Bhagavad Gita. We didn't cover that particular verse because it was too honest, it was details. So, but it basically breaks into 27 elements, of which we have the Panchabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, ether. I showed you the table yesterday actually. So the Panchabhutas, and then the Jnana Indriyas, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and then the 5 Karma Indriyas, the working senses. So therefore now we have 15. 5, 5, 5, 15. And then we have the object of the senses, the 5 Tanmatras. So then 20. And then we have what we call false ego in the subtle body. Remember the subtle body? It has mind, intelligence, false ego. So 23 already. So then 23, and then it also includes the Mahatattva. So 24. So altogether 24 elements have all been differentiated. So that's what happens in the Mahatattva. After that, it further differentiates, further differentiates, and then we have all the creation in this material world. So that is how it goes, right? If you want to hear more details about this, it's clearly described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this Prakriti and Mahatattva is considered Brahman, whereas this Pradhan is not. Why Pradhan is not considered Brahman? Because it wasn't manifested. It didn't manifest at that time. It didn't sort of exist at that time. The potential was there, but it wasn't connected to the Supreme Lord. So because Prakriti became connected with the Supreme Lord, initially it was just shadow. But when it got connected with the Supreme Lord by the Supreme Lord's glance, when he gave the merciful glance at that shadow, then the shadow also became connected to the Supreme Lord. It became Brahman, right? So that's the point. And then the rest of it is also Brahman. So Brahman basically means everything. So that means us, the Jiva. It means material creation due to Prakriti and Mahatattva, material energy. It is also the Supreme Lord, also part of Brahman. And that's just the first level of realization of God. So then, if we go higher, then there's Paramatma. We can understand Brahman has a source, and we can understand further the Bhagavan aspect, where the Leela and the Gunas are clearly understood. So back to this, right? So I was just explaining to you so we can understand clearly. So the Supreme Lord has 2 energies. Antaranga, actually, the Antaranga Shakti, the shadow of that energy is the Bahiranga Shakti, which is what we described just now as Pradhan, Prakriti, and what's the other one? Mahatattva. So note, Pradhan is outside Brahman, right? Whereas Prakriti is within Brahman. Now, why does the Lord want to look at Prakriti? The Lord does not need to look at Prakriti because the Lord usually always associates with the spiritual energy only. He always associates only with the spiritual energy. He doesn't look at the shadow. But he looks at the shadow only for one reason. The reason is because the jivas, which is a part of the spiritual energy, one of the parts of the spiritual energy, right? The jivas, they have independence, they have free will. The Lord doesn't force the jiva to do anything. So I mentioned this point also before. So therefore, when the jiva misuses his independence and he wants to enjoy matter separately from the Lord, in away from the connection of the Lord, therefore the Lord facilitates this. But unfortunately, the jiva cannot remain in the Brahman, because everything in connection with the Lord is in Brahman. So if the jiva wants to enjoy separately from the Lord, he has to go away, right, from this spiritual energy. So that's the reason the Lord glances at Prakriti, at the shadow, and creates the material world, so which is separate from the spiritual world, so that this jiva can go to this playground and satisfy his desire, material desires. So therefore the Lord glances at Pradhan, energizes the Pradhan, and the Prakriti differentiates, and then it becomes Mahatattva. And the 24 ingredients of this material universes are created. And then it goes on further and creates this entire material creation, which is the cosmos. So then the jiva, now he enters, now there's a playground for the jiva. Now there is a place. The cosmos is now created. It's there for the jiva to now enter into the material creation. So what happens when he enters? So the jiva is initially pure, but as he enters into this material creation, it's like rainwater. The rain in the sky is pure, but when it drops into the earth, when it touches the earth, it hits the ground. What happens to that rainwater? It becomes like mud. So the water is pure, but the water has become mixed with matter, right? It has become mixed with mud and all the sand and everything, and it becomes mud. So that's what has happened to us. So in order for us, the jiva, to associate with matter, we need to take a body. So therefore, we mix with matter, and we have now developed this material body together with the subtle body, which is the mind, intelligence, and the ahankar, false ego. So all this facilitates the jiva so that he can enjoy in this material world, or he tries to enjoy in this material world, separate from the Supreme Lord. So that's the problem. Okay. So, and therefore we have all the jivas. Now, it might look like as if the jivas came from matter, because, you know, in our experience, we only see that everybody is born in this material world. Everybody is taking birth over here, right? So it may look like as if we came from matter, just like how the scientists are saying, right? They say that, you know, we are simply a bunch of chemicals. There is no such thing as spirit. So we all came from matter. So they are trying, that's their theory. 400,000 years ago, they said some chemicals somehow in the oceans, due to very high pressure, very high temperature, and some lightning strikes, suddenly these chemicals joined and formed a complex chemical. And this complex chemical had some consciousness. Suddenly it had some consciousness. So that's what they are saying. So the challenge is, if that's the case, then why can't they produce that in their scientific labs? So they cannot produce consciousness artificially, because that is spirit. It is not within the control of the scientists. They can only do artificial intelligence. They can only, you know, do programming, robot, and it's not real consciousness. It is not independent. It is controlled consciousness. So anyway, so why we are saying this is we are giving this example. The example is given by the acharyas that sometimes, you know, the scorpion, it likes to go to rice, and then it likes to stay in the rice, and it likes to lay its eggs over there. And you know, when the scorpion's eggs are mixed with the rice, and then somebody takes some part of the rice and goes and sells it to other people, then the person who looks at keeps the rice, and then suddenly the rice is just rice, but then suddenly one day they find scorpions within that rice. So it looks to them as if the scorpion suddenly came out of the rice. But actually, we can understand, actually, that's not the case. Already there were eggs within the rice. So in the same way, the Acharyas explain, though it looks like as if we are born from matter, but actually we are not. So the seed has actually dropped in the form. The spirit souls have already been impregnated. So Krishna says here, right? He says in this verse, if you look at this verse, just now, he says, I impregnate. Sorry, let me go back. So he says here, where's that verse? 14.3. I impregnate that. What does Krishna impregnate? Krishna impregnates the material nature. So this Prakriti is like our mother for this body, right? So we take birth in this Prakriti. So the mother is like Prakriti. So that's why Mother Durga, right? So therefore, in the material world, the Prakriti is Durga. And the Father, he is the Supreme Lord. Okay, so that's the understanding given in the Bhagavad Gita. So let's continue with the slides. Okay, so then goes to the next verse. So let's read this verse. Now, Krishna wants us to understand more details about the nature of this Prakriti. You know, we all say nature. What is nature? Nature is, we when we say nature, we think of the documentary, we think of, the National Geographic. So that is what we understand as nature. But that is part of this world, and that is the nature. So when we say nature, the question arises, whose nature? So this is the nature of this material world. So now Krishna is going to give us more understanding about the nature of this material world. So 14.5, Sattvam Rajastama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibadanti mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. Translation: material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So that's clear, right? When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, so, remember the rain touching the ground becomes mud. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. Just like how the pure rain water from the sky, when it touches the earth, it becomes muddy. So it becomes conditioned. So and what is this? Depends on where the rain falls, isn't it? If it falls on a different kind of sand, you have a different kind of mud. So some mud is thicker, some mud is it's lighter in nature. So it depends. So therefore, this conditioning is basically the three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. It's called sattva, rajas, and tama. So sattva is the mode of goodness, sattvic, and rajas is the mode of passion, and tamas is the mode of ignorance. And the master of this material nature, the person whose power is controlling this material nature, the Shakti of the Lord, the external Shakti of the Lord, that is Durga. So let's look at the verses that we have covered so far. So in 14.3 to 14.5, Krishna is giving us understanding about the Brahman and the Prakriti, so the material nature. So we learned about Mahatattva, which is the basis of life, which is what Krishna impregnates, right? And we understood that Krishna is the supreme father of all jivas. So he, just by glancing at that material energy, by the will of the Lord, the jivas get injected into that material energy, into Prakriti, for the satisfaction of the desire of the jivas. So then we want to now understand the three modes of nature, which is part of that Prakriti. So what is these three modes of nature? Sattva, Rajas, and Guna. Now they work very closely with each other. These three nature, the goodness, passion, and ignorance, is very closely intertwined. It's like a rope. The acharyas explain it's like a rope. You know how when we make a rope, there are usually 3 strands of rope, isn't it? So, and each strand itself will have another 3 strands. So this is three groups of rope, right? And if you take each one of these strands, inside there itself, they may have another 3 strands. So like that, Sattva, Raja, Guna will form, and then Sattva, Raja, Guna. So it becomes a very complicated meshing of the rope. So in this way, it's called a rope because this nature, Sattva, Raja, and Tama, they are the ones which is tying the jiva to this prakriti. Remember yesterday I gave the example of the balloon. So the balloon is, inside the balloon is gas, helium gas. Okay. So the soul or the jiva is like the helium gas. And the balloon, what is trapping the gas inside? It's the balloon. So that balloon is actually material nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tama, which is trapping that jiva within this material nature. So cannot escape. So let's hear what the Supreme Lord has to say about these 3 natures. So 14.6. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashakam anamayam shuka sangena badnati jnana sangena chanaga. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating and frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by the sense of happiness and knowledge. This is the word got truncated, is knowledge. So now Krishna is describing the mode of goodness. So he says Sattvam. Sattvam is the mode of goodness. So it is the characteristic of that is those who are in the mode of goodness are usually happy people. Shuka, right? So they are generally have a sense of happiness, right? Why? And it's because they have some knowledge, jnana. So it's based on happiness and it's based on knowledge. And what does it do? It is very illuminating. It destroys ignorance, and the reason and the result of that is that it frees one from all sinful reactions. Why? The reason is because one has knowledge, and when one has knowledge, one knows what is sinful and what is not sinful. So that is the reason he is able to escape. And he also knows what are the pious activities clearly, and he is also inclined towards that. So therefore, this is the characteristics of the mode of goodness. So usually you will find people who are, some scientists, people who are dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, academicians, or those who are, the type of nature of their work. It's very complicated. You cannot say that all academicians are in the mode of goodness, because the 3 modes are actually very complicated. Within the 3 modes, within goodness itself, there will be another 3 sets of goodness, passion, ignorance. So it's therefore you cannot give a sweeping statement, but generally you can say that those who are dedicated towards the pursuit of knowledge, and those who are generally in a more happy nature, you could say that they are situated in the mode of goodness. And then what is Rajaguna? So Bhagavad Gita 14.7, Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tannibadnati kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings. So, O son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fructifactions. So we can understand that Rajaguna, or the mode of passion, is situated in desires. So any type of desire a person has, that means we can understand it is mode of passion acting in our system. So, and what does it do? What it does is it binds us to work for us to achieve that desire. So this is currently the nature of this entire world. So different ages, the three modes are predominant different times. So earlier in the Satya Yuga, the golden age, the mode of goodness was very much predominant. So in Kali Yuga, the mode of ignorance is very much predominant. But Kali Yuga is still new. We are still only 5,000 years in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga will go on for 400,000 years. So it begins with goodness and then it moves towards passion. So within the mode of ignorance, which is Kali Yuga, the beginning part of the Kali Yuga is mode of goodness, and then the later part will be the mode of passion, and towards the end it will be completely mode of ignorance. So we don't want to be here in the later part of Kali Yuga. It will be horrible. So that's the idea. So it binds one into fruification. So we can find, people, basically passion. The word sums it all. So passion for work, passion for skills, passion for doing anything, passion for, relationships. So that's basically, we say, sex makes the whole world go around. Because, if you see from TV, advertisements, everything is all about this passion, right? If you talk about listening to songs, if you see songs nowadays, it's so full of all this. Last time, at least, it used to be hidden, not so gross. But nowadays, the songs and the movies, they have become extremely gross in this passion, right? So what it does, what's the result of it? So we will talk about that later. But generally, it binds one into fruitifactions. So it's not a very happy state. It makes a person always not satisfied, because passion can never be satisfied. It's like fire. It continuously burns. If you want to satisfy fire by giving more fuel, will we ever satisfy the fire? The fire will only grow bigger, right? So that's not the way to satisfy passion. So then comes the mode of ignorance, 14.8. Tamastu ajnana jam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadhalasya nirabhis nidrabhis tan nibhagnati bharata. O son of Bharata, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The result of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. So basically, the characteristic here is ignorance. So it's lack of knowledge, complete darkness. So because they don't understand what is right and what is wrong, due to lack of knowledge, they commit a lot of horrible activities, sinful activities, activities which destroys one's own self. Like generally anger, addiction, generally meat eating. So all this is generally in the mode of ignorance. Later, Krishna will give more details. Here he's giving an overall summary, not a summary, he's giving an abstract, just an introduction. So he's going to spend the next few chapters talking about these three modes, because understanding these three modes become key for us to bring ourselves to a higher level. Then move on to the next. So let's just talk a little bit more about some these three modes. So we can understand the mode of sattva or goodness is about balance, right? It's about harmony. It's about being positive. It's about being peaceful, satisfied. It's about clarity of thought. So one doesn't do anything which disturbs these things. So that is generally sattva. So then rajas is about movement, activity, right? It's about energy. It's about excitement. It's about passion. And it always gives, it does not bring peace. It brings disturbances. And what is tamas? Tamas means inertia. That means don't want to do anything, lazy, inactivity, always feel like, let everything, we don't want to do anything. So negative, generally, apathy. Apathy means it's like against. They feel like not only against, it feels like they don't care. no care for anything. That's apathy, dullness, and ignorance. Basically, it's all ignorance. So Krishna actually goes on in the next few verses to give some points about these three modes. So I've summarized them in this table. So if you look at the mode of goodness, the binding force here is sense of happiness, satisfaction, knowledge, and superiority. So all three modes are like, remember I mentioned they are like ropes. So even the mode of goodness is binding. It is also a rope. It is not something which will release us. So what binds us in the mode of goodness to this material world? A sense of superiority, pride. And then because they are learned, because they feel their lives are satisfied, knowledgeable, so there is some kind of superiority complex a little bit. And they feel happy within that. They feel that I don't need to go any further. So that is trapping. So this kind of mode of goodness traps one within this mode of goodness. What's the characteristic? Knowledge, no sinful reaction. Generally, people in the mode of goodness, they don't do sinful activities. They are nice people, good people generally. They make up the general good population of society. The results are piety. In their next life, they will enjoy that piety. Within this life also, they will enjoy that piety. And then the modes of misery, the modes of passion. Now, what is the binding force of passion? The binding force of passion is attachment. Because they have so much of passion, they become very attached to fruitive activities, attached to working. People, they continue working. They work throughout their lives. And because their wants and needs are never satisfied, even as they grow on and on and on. So they never have time to dedicate some time to spiritual pursuits. So that is what the mode of passion will do. It will trap one so much within this materialistic activities. The rat race, we call it the rat race. So the binding force are the ropes of desire. Why this is born? It is born out of desire. I want, I want, I want. If it's not I want, I want, I want, it is my family wants, my family wants, my family wants. If it's not my family wants, then it is my extended family. And then if it's not my extended family, it's my race, Bangsa, So then if not Bangsa, then Nagara. Then like that, it goes on, or political party or whatever. So this is ropes of desires and attachment. Characteristics, very intense, unlimited desires, longings, great attachment, fruitive activities. And the result, this is very interesting. This is what Krishna says. The result of the mode of passion, it only leads to misery. So this is a very important point for us to note. Initially, passion is very sweet. Passion is very sweet. It's like honey, but it eventually leads to poison. Anything done in the mode of passion or with the consciousness of passion, it leads to misery. So every activity or behavior should be done in the mode of goodness if we want good results, right? So that's the idea. So then comes the mode of ignorance. So basically the points are madness, laziness, sleep. Now madness doesn't mean those people who are in the asylum in Tanjung Rambutan in Malaysia. It's not like that is really bad madness. But in more or less, almost everybody in this world is mad to some degree. If you ask a psychologist, they will say like that. Because everyone has some idiosyncrasies, they have some kind of some kind of complex. Everyone has some kind of complex within their mind. Some have less complex, some have more complex. So it is all born out of delusion. It's because they don't have proper knowledge, they don't have proper understanding. So they like to put themselves in illusion. Laziness, that is also another point. Too much sleeping. Because when one sleeps, basically one is escaping from reality. So escapism, all this is mode of ignorance. So delusion, darkness, madness, and inertia. One doesn't want to do anything. So this is the result out of all these things. It's only foolishness, and the person degrades lower. His next life becomes very bad. he'll either become, hellish life awaits such a person, because they act more and more. They don't do their duty. Because they don't do their duty, they generate sin, and at the same time, when they do their duty, also they do it badly, with all the wrong ways, So therefore, they develop a lot of sin. So these three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are always tussling for supremacy. They are not fixed. It's always in constant flux. It's changing, changing, changing. So in some people, it changes very quickly. In some people, it changes slowly. In some people, so it depends on timing, depends on our karma, depends on our mental mind frame. So it's always, sometimes we feel nice, sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we are very full of attachment and desires, sometimes we are lazy and sleepy. So therefore, these three things are always tussling, turning and turning and turning. So these three things are like ropes which bind the soul, the Atma, within this Prakriti. So then Krishna continues, he talks about the results. Now, what do you get about the results of these three modes? So from verse 11 to 18, he talks about the results. So here are two verses, which we will skip the Sanskrit and we'll just go straight to the translation. So he says, now there are many results, but here there's a summary of the result. The summary is when we die, right? So when one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the pure higher planets of the great sages. So remember in chapter 8, we said the state of consciousness one dies determines where we attain in the next life, right? So therefore, we are talking about the state of consciousness at death. So if we spend our life predominantly in the mode of goodness, then as a good bet that at the time of death, we will also be in the mode of goodness if we are careful. So that's the idea. So when one dies in the mode of goodness, because he does a lot of pious activities, he has dedicated his life to knowledge and piety, he attains the higher planets of the great sages, like Janaloka, Tapaloka, Maharloka, Satyaloka. When one dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged in fruitive activities. So this is predominantly human beings. Because there's so much of desire, when these desires are not rejected at the time of death, so still these desires are there within the Atma. Therefore, again, he takes birth again and again and again within the fruitive plane, which is within the material world, particularly in earth. And when one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom. So this is an important point to remember also. So we want to avoid at all costs the mode of ignorance, and to a large extent also the mode of passion, and we should remain mostly in the mode of goodness. Krishna says that to Arjuna. He actually tells Arjuna, one should remain in the mode of goodness as far as possible. But even the mode of goodness is binding. So how to escape this mode of goodness? How to escape this material situation? So then Krishna says, one should transcend. I think Ms. Parvati, you are not muted. Okay. So one needs to transcend. So there's the verse in chapter 2. Krishna will tell Arjuna, Traigunya Vishaya Yoga, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. He says, transcend these three modes, Arjuna. So one has to go beyond the three modes. But to go beyond, one cannot go beyond from the mode of ignorance. One cannot go beyond from the mode of passion. One has to bring themselves to the mode of goodness. And why the mode of goodness? Because that's where knowledge can retain. That's where our lifestyle becomes balanced and equipoised. Because without these things, it becomes difficult for us to transcend. So it's like, when you want to take off, you must at least come to a higher platform before you actually launch yourself. So that is for the normal, the normal path which is given. Okay. So therefore, Krishna says, right, transcend these three modes and become situated in Brahman. How to do this? There is only one way, which is yoga, right? And yoga is the only way which can bring us to the transcended platform. We already heard about that from chapters 1 all the way to chapter 12. And from chapter 6 to 12, Krishna indicates that bhakti yoga is the best path, because there you don't have to artificially bring yourself into mode of goodness. Simply by following the path of bhakti, one automatically brings oneself. So anyway, Arjuna at this point, he wants to know, what is the symptom of someone who is already transcended, who is called the Sthita Prajna? That means one who is now transcended beyond the three modes. So Krishna outlines some of these qualities. He says, one who is transcended is someone who does not hate the three modes. Even the mode of ignorance, even the mode of passion, he doesn't hate it. He understands it. He knows about it. He knows that these are the three modes of nature, right? So what he does then? He remains unwavered and undisturbed within the three modes. So, and he also remains neutral and transcendental to the three modes. And he who knows that the modes alone are active, that it's not the soul who is doing the activities, it is the three modes of nature which is tossing the Atma here and there within the material and within the body. And then because he understands all these things and because of his practice of yoga, he becomes equipoised. That means he becomes undisturbed in happiness, in distress, in heat and in cold, with enemies or with friends. He becomes equipoised. How is that possible? Because he has developed equal vision, right? Because he sees Paramatma in everyone. He sees the Supreme Lord. He sees all the energy as part of the Supreme Lord. So this kind of understanding cannot be artificially cultivated. It has to be realized by the practice of the yogic process or by the practice of bhakti. So he who sees with equal vision, he who is renounced of material activities. So ultimately one has to renounce. The desires has to be thrown away, right? And one has to have their vision fixed in transcendence. Otherwise, even in the mode of goodness, they will become trapped. They will not transcend. So that is the danger. So we have now come to the last verse of this chapter. Okay. So 1426, let's say this verse. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Translation. So Krishna tells Arjuna, transcend. So he already says transcend. Now, right after he says transcend these modes, he is recommending to Arjuna the best way to transcend these three modes. So he says, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So, bhakti yogena sevate, in devotional service. So one who engages in devotional service automatically at once transcends the modes of material nature. Why? Why is that so? Because it may not look like that. So it says that one who is in full devotional service, when one is doing devotional service in full, it's like the person looks like as if he's like existing normally. You know, that person also will have to eat. That person also will have to, do the duties to take care of his family or whatever. But the consciousness or the goal is now shifted, because the goal of such a person is attaining Krishna or to please Krishna. So why does he work? He works because he has to maintain himself and his family so that together they can practice devotional service, so that they can please the Supreme Lord, so that he can give some amount of money for the benefit of the of preaching, or for the seva of the Lord, for buying things for the temple. So these kind of things. So the goal is now shifted. And when one cooks and one eats, so someone who is engaging full devotional service, they will offer everything to the Lord. Even the house is offered to the Lord. The Supreme Lord becomes the Lord of the house. The home becomes a temple. And in this way, the family becomes an ashram. So therefore, it's called Grihashta Ashram. So that is the family life. So like that, there are different ashrams. There is Sannyas Ashram, Family Life Ashram, Brahmacharya Ashram, and Vanaprastha Ashram. So these different ashrams are all centers of devotional service. So for each ashram, the devotional service is slightly different, but it is there and it can all be used automatically for the service of the Lord. So by doing this, because they are not doing it for their own sense gratification, it is for the pleasure of the Lord. So therefore, at once, they transcend the modes of material nature. So, and they come to the level of Brahman. So this is the advantage of the bhakti path. One does not have to renounce everything and go to the forest and sit and then do meditation and stay there in the forest. One doesn't have to do that. So in the bhakti process, it can be done easily. So here I'm giving you the example. There's a story. I can end with a story of how this bhakti process can completely convert a person, even in the mode of ignorance, to transcend automatically. So this is a story given in the scriptures. You can find it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So there was once a hunter. This hunter is called Mrigari. It's a very famous story, Mrigari the hunter. So he was a hunter. His father was a hunter. His entire parampara was a hunter. He was born like that. And what he used to do, he used to go hunting every day, but he hunted in a very peculiar manner. He will just shoot the arrows, and then he will not kill the animal. He will shoot the arrows, but he will leave the animals half dead. So they will be like, in pain, in suffering. So and that's what he used to do. And one day Narada Muni was coming in the forest, and he saw this Mrigari the hunter going about his job. He was killing all the animals. All the animals were running in fear. He shot them, and he left them half dead. He didn't even kill them. So Narada said, "Hey, what's your name?" And then this Mrigari the hunter, though he was a hunter, he can recognize Narada Muni as a great sage. And during those days, the culture was there. They will give respect to sages. So Mrigari, he gave his respect to Narada Muni, and he replied, "My name is Mrigari, and my father is also a hunter." And then Narada said, "What are you doing?" Say, "I'm hunting." And then he said, but yes, you're hunting, but why are you leaving the animals half dead? And then the hunter said, "That's what my father taught me. And when I asked my father why I need to leave the animals half dead, it's because it makes the flesh tastier. Even nowadays, usually that's what they do sometimes. I've seen they take the animal, they hang the animal, they weaken the animal, they cut the animal a little, so the animal starts to bleed, and they hang it upside down so that it remains alive for some time before it dies. The reason for this is because when the animal is left in that state, it seems the adrenaline in the body increases. The production of the hormone adrenaline increases. And adrenaline is a hormone when somebody is excited or in fear or in great pain. So this hormone is released. It makes the person very active and alert. So the animal is left like that because this hormone apparently it softens the flesh and it sweetens the flesh. So therefore, it fetches a better price to people they sell it to. So therefore, that's the technology behind what he was doing. So then when Narada heard this, oh my goodness, what you're doing? You're giving them so much pain. Do you not know that this will create so much of sin for you? And then this Mrigari, he caught on to that word, sin. What is sin? He didn't know what is sin. Because he was in the mode of ignorance. His entire family was like that. He was born in that situation. There was nobody there to enlighten him. So for him, this is my work. and said, what is this? What is wrong with what I'm doing? I'm simply maintaining my life. Yes, you are maintaining your life, but you are getting sin. So therefore, then he asked, why? Can you explain what is this sin? So from then onwards, Narada Muni started to explain the concept of sin. And when he heard about all these things, and he asked, what will this sin give me? Then Narada Muni started to explain what will happen. Go to hell, suffer horribly, next life is not very good. So then Murgari, he was an intelligent hunter. Then he said, no, I don't want all these things. I didn't know all these things. So then immediately he accepted Narada Muni as his guru. So like that, Narada Muni instructed him. And then he gave him little by little, he gave an instruction and he told, all I want you to do now is I want you to chant the Hare Krishna. I want you to chant the names of God. And while you're chanting, please follow the tenets of the bhakti. Follow the processes of bhakti yoga. That means do not be merciful. Do not kill or harm any living entity, right? Because any yoga, if you want to practice yoga, it must stand on the 4 legs of dharma, which is compassion, daya, and and the second leg is satyam, truthfulness, and the third leg is cleanliness or saucham, and the fourth leg is tapa or austerities. One has to be ready to do all these 4 things, then only yoga can stand. So then he told, follow these 4 things, don't kill, don't do all these things, and at the same time, uh, sing the names of God, chant the names of God constantly every day. That's your sadhana. That's what you need to do. So Murgari was very faithful and he did this very faithfully. And eventually, what happened was, uh, Narada Muni, he had a friend. He had another sage. He always goes about with Parvata Muni. So once Narada and Parvata Muni, they were walking, and Narada said, oh, this is where my disciple Mrigari is. Come, I want you to meet my friend, my disciple Mrigari, he told Parvata Muni. So both also went, and suddenly they saw this person, this Mrigari, the hunter, is there, and he saw that his guru is coming. So immediately he went and he started coming towards Narada Muni. But while he was coming, it was very strange that he was always looking at the ground and he was jumping here and there, jumping here and there, jumping here and there on the ground. And then he came and did his dandavat, and that also in a very strange way he was doing his obeisances. Then Parvata Muni is asking, what are you doing? So then he says, oh, I'm trying to avoid stepping on some ants, because on the way to come and see you, all these creatures are there and I'm trying to avoid killing them, because I am trying to follow my sadhana. So then Narada said, why are you avoiding them? Because I cannot bear the thought that I would kill these creatures. And then Parvata Muni was amazed. Say, all this happened so quickly? Then Narada Muni says, then the Brigari, he's like, yes, ever since I followed your instructions, O Narada Muni, my guru, I have completely had a change of heart. And now I'm so aghast at the idea of even killing an ant. What to speak of killing all the other creatures of all what I used to do. So Parvata Muni was told about Murgari's previous occupation, what he used to be doing. So now he's completely different. So that's the understanding. So that is basically explaining this verse. So one who engages in full devotional service, at once unfailing in all circumstances. So in order to do this, some faith has to be there. At once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So that is what the story of Brigari the hunter is. So the same point is also there for Prabhupada. Prabhupada, at the age of 69, at the order of his spiritual master, he was a sannyasi. He actually left he left to United States alone with only 40 rupees on a steamer ship. And while in there, he suffered 2 heart attacks and somehow he survived, and he only ate potatoes, because the potato and rice, because there's no food for him in that steamer. It was all non-vegetarian food. And then he was alone in that place in Boston Harbor, and somehow he managed to get a place to stay, and alone he was preaching to people. And what he used to do, he used to go to the park and he used to chant Hare Krishna alone. And in this way, he slowly he attracted people to come to him. And who are the types of people who came? They were all hippies. That time, 1969, 1970, this was the height of hippie culture in the United States. And you know what the hippies were doing? They were definitely in the mode of ignorance. They rejected society. They were taking drugs, marijuana, cannabis, ganja, and they were like trying to attain something higher, and they were freely having sex with different partners. So these were the type of people, very, very unclean, very no tapasya at all. So to these people, somehow, by giving the Hare Krishna Mahamantra to them, and by his wonderful kindness, and by his lectures daily, right? Slowly, these hippies all changed. They all became brahmacharis, and even some of them went on to become sannyasis. So this is the Hare Krishna miracle, the explosion that happened during those days by the grace of Srila Prabhupada and by the grace of Krishna. So again, the verse is proven here, how it actually can change people. I also have seen many people who have changed, and I think I myself have changed a lot from this process of Bhakti Yoga. So it really works. After all, it is the verse given by the Lord. So this is the last verse, 1427. Just now was the second last verse. So 1427, now Krishna says you can come to the level of Brahman simply by Bhakti Yoga. And then Krishna says, I am the basis of that Brahman. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amristayavyasyah cha. So remember, in the beginning of this chapter, Krishna began by defining how he impregnates that Brahman. So he is also part of Brahman, but in the material nature, he impregnates that material nature. Now he's ending with the same Brahman. He says, I am the basis of that material nature. I am the basis of that Brahman also. So Bhagavan is the topmost realization. So this verse is very, very important. It clearly indicates the highest level of God realization, which is Bhagavan, Krishna. So I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So he's inviting all of us to take up this process of Bhakti Yoga, transcend these three modes of material nature, and become situated in Brahman and attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, directly. So that is the conclusion. And the takeaways for today is we were talking about how we can develop the vision to see everything equally, and then how Bhakti Yoga can deliver us from these three modes of material nature, and what is the Param Gatim, the ultimate goal, which is Bhagavan, the basis of Brahman. So the key takeaway here is we heard about Prakriti, Mother Prakriti, and Krishna the Father. And we heard about the nature of how Prakriti works. And we heard about the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and what the results are being situated in them. And we also heard about Krishna being the basis of that Brahman. So these are the three key takeaways for today's chapter, chapter 14. Okay, so I will end with this verse. Apanna samsritim goram yan nama vivasho grinan tata sadhyo vimuchyate yad bibeti swayam bayam. So this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, chapter 1, verse 14. So the translation goes like this. Living beings who are entangled in the complicated mesh of birth and death. Why complicated and why mesh? Because it's the three modes, it's like a rope. So the three modes of nature is this mesh, and it's very complicated. This mesh of birth and death can be freed immediately, just like the verse we mentioned just now, right? By even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. So this is very similar to that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, the second last verse which I was talking about, right? How immediately one can transcend the three modes, how one can be freed. Even by unconsciously, the holy name is so powerful that even without wanting to, there is a story actually. If you can Google, you can type the story of Ajamila, you will find out about how Ajamila was a person who unconsciously chanted the holy names. He was a very sinful person, but somehow at the time of death, by special mercy, he happened to chant the holy name even unconsciously. He named his son Narayana, and then he called him Narayana, Narayana when when the Yamadutas were coming. So even that saved him. We don't have time to hear this story. One day we will talk about this story. But the point here is the holy name is very, very powerful. It is one of the key cornerstones of the bhakti process. So let us end today by saying this Panchatattva mantra, invoking the mercy of the Lord, and by chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 3 times. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we hope that you will go on continuing chanting in your free time. It will be nice if we can every day make a set time. We can set 5 minutes aside to just chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and slowly we can increase this as we can, and we will see tangible advancement. We will see how we can slowly escape from these 3 modes of material nature, and we can eventually transcend. Okay, so these are the ordering, right? You can look at all this for the ordering of the Srimad Bhagavatam and all that if you want. This is the map to our temple and the address. So we would like to end with questions. Anyone has any questions? No questions.